The Boston Bruins might have an eye on the exceptional free agent class of 2026, but that also just makes the Tanner Jeannot signing a little more curious.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Wednesday, July 9th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Now, it has been a couple days since I jumped on the pod. I was away over the weekend with my family. We rented a cottage near Ottawa and had 13 of us there. It was very fun. Nice little break. Back on the podcast today, and we're going to discuss the reports that the Bruins kind of have an eye on the 2026 free agent class, which has huge names potentially available. We'll talk about what that free agency strategy says about the bigger picture. We'll discuss the robust market for Tanner Jeannot on July 1 and the curious decision to sign him for 5 years. And we will pay tribute to Lyndon Byers, who passed away over the weekend. Before we get into all that, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at Locked NHL Bruins. That's on X, Blue Sky, Instagram Threads, TikTok. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts, and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I have been covering this team for various outlets for about 20 years now. It's been over a week since the Bruins didn't make the loudest of noise on July 1, despite having some cap space to use. And maybe that's the point. Elliot Friedman on the 32 Thoughts podcast the other day suggested that the Bruins are among several teams that potentially stay quiet this summer. No splashy signings, no headline-stealing trades, in order to keep an eye on the real prize, which is the 2026 UFA class, which could include the likes of Connor McDavid, Jack Eichel, Kirill Kaprizov, Artemi Panarin, Jason Robertson, and Kyle Connor, among others. This year's class was pretty thin. Mitch Marner was potentially available. Brock Besser, Nikolai Ehlers were the definite highlights up front. The Bruins had a clear need in the top six, which they seemingly potentially maybe addressed by trading for Victor Arvidsson from the Edmonton Oilers. And then they went out and signed a bunch of guys on some relatively small, low-risk deals like Sean Corrali, Michael Eyssimont, to 2-year deals, which will not affect what they're able to do next summer. The Tanner Jeannot deal, as we'll talk about here in a minute, perhaps. Now, that list could change. And there's a real risk here because, as we saw with this year's free agent class, there's a good chance that some of these guys will re-sign. Like, what are the chances that Connor McDavid actually gets to the free agent market? And the same can be said for Eichel, Kaprizov, Robertson, Connor, Panarin, maybe since he's more advanced in his career. But even if half of these guys hit the open market, 2026 could be the most elite UFA class in a decade. And it's not just these guys that are potentially available. There are some other big names as well. If you look at the list of 2026 potential free agents, it's just a who's who. There's also Alex Ovechkin. He's probably not going anywhere other than maybe Russia. But there's Patrick Laine, perhaps Cale Makar, Anze Kopitar, Martin Necas, Evgeny Malkin, Nick Schmaltz, Trevor Zegras, RFA, but still, Jaden Schwartz, Adrian Kempe. The list goes on and on. There will be some very good players available next summer. If, of course, they don't re-sign, which is the risk of potentially waiting for that time. There's going to be a big cap explosion as well. It's going to exceed $100 million by next summer. And that gives teams massive financial flexibility to build some pretty good teams. The cap this year, 95.5. I think it go up to like 104. So just that right there, even with not anybody coming off the books, that gives you money to spend next summer. And the Bruins will only have one pending unrestricted free agent, maybe two to deal with, in Andrew Peeke and Victor Arvidsson, who could be very much a one and done if he even lasts that long, because they might trade him at the deadline. For the Bruins, they're not really in go for it mode quite yet. Instead, they've locked up Morgan Geekie. They extended Mason Lohrei. They traded for Victor Arvidsson and added those short-term pieces in Kuraly, Esimont. They re-upped with Husnudinov, John Beecher on short-term deals. It's kind of reminiscent of the transition season a couple years ago where they added James Van Riemsdyk, Kevin Shattenkirk, and looking to build for the future. That's exactly what the Bruins look to be doing. And in an interview with Connor Ryan, Marco Sturm said that, it's not going to happen overnight. A retool isn't the quickest thing necessarily. They do have core guys like Jeremy Swayman, Charlie McAvoy, David Pastrnak, of course, a secondary core of Hampus Lindholm, Nikita Zadorov, Elias Lindholm, and some younger players who need NHL reps like Matt Poitras, Fraser Minton, Fabian Lysell, even Mason Lohrei to an extent needs seasoning at the NHL level. And of course, there's Husnudinov. This could be a bridge year to try to develop the next wave and keep cap flexibility. It's kind of like the 2019 Florida Panthers, who built from within, waited for their shot, and then pounced with the Matthew Tkachuk trade. And maybe the Bruins are setting up for a McDavid-level splash next year, even Eichel-level splash. It's not the most thrilling approach right now, but imagine opening free agency next summer with $20 million or so to spend and an elite class to choose from. Having said that, though, just when you thought the Bruins were all about patience, discipline, youth, scoring, evolution, they went out and handed Tanner Jeannot a 5-year contract. We have to talk about the market for him on July 1. And again, kind of what that signing says about the Bruins' approach. Do you ever wish managing your money felt a bit easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app, folks. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. Sometimes we've looked at our finances and been surprised by how fast it adds up. Little purchases like coffees, even streaming subscriptions, prompted us to take control of our finances with Monarch Money. All you have to do is use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Okay, we've discussed how the Bruins might have been somewhat conservative here on July 1 with a view to the 2026 free agent market. Now, that is a bit of a gamble because, as we saw this year, so many of the potentially available players re-signed with their respective clubs, like a Brock Besser. You had Mitch Marner with the sign and trade. Only Nikolai Ehlers moved out of the big names, and it was apparent that he had Carolina in mind as a preferred destination. So you're banking on guys hitting the market, which is not guaranteed at all, and B, that they would choose to come to Boston. Now, one guy who did choose to come to Boston was Tanner Jeannot, and he was and has been, still is, much talked about because on a day when the Bruins were kind of playing it safe, this move stood out like a bruise that he's looking to put on the opposition. A 5-year, $18.75 million deal, $3.75 million AAV for the next, $3.4 million AAV for the next several seasons. The total for that deal was $17 million over 5 years. As Ty Anderson of 98.5 pointed out, it's a massive commitment for a player who has one goal in his last 34 games, wasn't seemingly heavily sought after on the open market, and looked like a perfect prove-it candidate for maybe 1 or 2 years, not a 5-year commitment. Now, having said that, Elliot Friedman of Sportsnet said that there were up to 10 teams that were interested in Jeannot on July 1, and he described the 28-year-old's market as fierce. He heard the competition for Jeannot included the Rangers, the Senators, the Maple Leafs, and there were a lot of teams that were after him. He initially heard the Kings offer to him was something like under $2 million a year. He, of course, played for the Kings last season. Friedman added, there's just not a lot of guys like him around anymore. Friedman has always liked Jeannot. He has to stay healthy, but there were a ton of teams after him, and there's not a lot of guys like him. Guys who can inflict punishment on the opposition and perhaps also chip in offensively, although we haven't seen that in his game as much over the last several years. Now, Friedman did explain that the Bruins think Jeannot's signing can elevate Nikita Zadorov's game as well. So it's kind of a insurance for Zadorov, who picked up 145 penalty minutes and fought 7 times during his first year in Boston, both career highs. It was Jeannot in the mix. Bruins management believes Zadorov won't feel the need to police things the same way. Now, the Bruins did have Trent Frederick in the mix last season, who seemingly could and should have filled that role. Same with Mark Kastelik. But whoever takes on that face-punching role, the Bruins want Zadorov just to play hockey. And according to Friedman, they felt last year Zadorov was fighting too much, going after guys too much. They're not the biggest team still, but they still got that big bad Bruins mentality a little bit, and they brought Jeannot in to be a little bigger, a little meaner, and so Zadorov doesn't have to do this kind of stuff as much. So if they can get more out of Zadorov in the process, then perhaps it could work out. Zadorov, of course, was signed to bring size, toughness to the blue line, but you don't want your top 4D taking on every fight, getting in on every post-whistle scrum, and being a revolving door to the penalty box. Jeannot brings that grit, fighting ability, that deterrence to the bottom 6, a real throwback, and Boston clearly believes in that identity still, despite saying they want to evolve offensively, despite committing to giving some of these younger guys a chance. That cap, though, the flexibility for 2026, the deal eats up space long term. It's not just a short-term muscle move. They're locked in for this guy for half a decade. Feels like a bit of an overcorrection after being pushed around last season. Perhaps they wanted to bring him in for, the balance of Zadorov's time in Boston. He's got 5 seasons left on his contract. Jeannot could be around for 5 seasons if he's not proving to be an anchor and or bought out. Could he bounce back? Sure. He did score 24 goals in 2021-22, but his offensive numbers have disappeared since, and that's quite a long time ago. I know in my keeper fantasy league, he drew a lot of buzz for that breakout, and he was on a smaller AAV back with the Nashville Predators. Could he play top 6? That fell off pretty quickly, even though the Tampa Bay Lightning just recently, traded for him by giving up a boatload of picks. Obviously did not pay off. It's not a league where enforcers hold the same value as they once did. And 5 years is the kind of term you give to a scoring power forward, not necessarily a third line agitator. Now, Jeannot may protect Zadorov, but who's protecting the Bruins from this cap hit if it doesn't work? It could be buried in the AHL. It is taking up about 3.6% of the cap. That will go down, of course, as the cap goes up, but it's still a significant and biggest commitment to a guy who's not penciled to be in the top 6. The top 6 cap hit guys are likely your top 6 forwards heading into next season. David Pastrnak, Elias Lindholm, Casey Middlestat, Morgan Geekie, Pavel Zacha, and Victor Arvidsson. And then you have Jeannot, Corrali, Kastelik, Esimont, Husnudinov, Beecher, Poitras coming in next. And that's not even mentioning Minton and Lysell, who could very well surprise in training camp and try to take a couple of those spots. So that's a bit more context on the Jeannot signing. Speaking of toughness, real, raw, old school toughness, we got to take a few minutes to honor one of the great enforcers in Bruins history, Lyndon Byers, who passed away over the weekend, and we'll discuss his impact on this club here as the podcast continues. All right, as we discussed, Tanner Jeannot, toughness, old school, it's only fitting we take a few minutes to remember a true Bruins original, one of the most beloved enforcers and personalities in team history, that being Lyndon Byers, who passed away on Friday, July 5th at the age of 61. Byers played for the Bruins from 1983 to 1992, 261 games, 24 goals, 66 points, and a staggering 959 penalty minutes, the 11th most in team history. He was drafted 39th overall in 1982, and while he came into a league as a talented scorer, he did have back-to-back 32-goal seasons with the WHL's Regina Pats. He carved out a different role in the NHL, that of a fearless enforcer and a fan favorite. Byers was a key part of the Bruins teams that reached the Stanley Cup final in 1988 and 1990, playing 28 playoff games across those 2 deep runs. Those teams, of course, were the teams that cemented my love for the Boston Bruins as a youngster. And he was a feature of those teams. I remember vividly being so impressed by the way he patrolled out there and was able to come alongside Cam Neely and give that crew an identity, and an edge. His best statistical season came in 1987-88 when he posted career highs in goals with 10, 24 points, and 236 penalty minutes. Cam Neely kind of summed it up perfectly by saying anytime LB was in the lineup, you knew he had your back, no matter who you were on the team. Now, after retiring in 1993, following a very brief stint with the San Jose Sharks, he took on a second career and became just as iconic off the ice as he was on it. For 25 years, he was a local radio legend on WAAF, entertaining Bruins fans with his hilarious stories, wild energy, and signature phrase, "not for nothing." He also made TV and movie cameos, showcasing his natural charisma and larger-than-life personality. He made several appearances on the show Rescue Me, starring Bruins fan Dennis Leary, and he made cameos in movies like Stuck on You and Shallow Hal. Now, the Boston Bruins, honored his legacy with the following statement, saying he was a fan favorite across his 9 seasons in the black and gold, thanks to his rugged, rough and tumble style, and was a key cog on the Bees teams that made trips to the Cup final in 88 and 90. The Bruins were deeply saddened by his death, and he was a true Bostonian that will be missed dearly, forever part of the Bruins family. Saskatchewan to Boston, quite a story and quite a life that he led. He's the son of Nipawin, Saskatchewan, I should say. Became a true Bostonian. He was honored by the Bruins during the centennial celebration, a moment that clearly meant the world to him and his family. And for his son to see what he meant to Bruins fans, Cam Neely said that was something very special for LB. Bob Sweeney, a fellow 82 draftee, said it best: he could throw him with the best of them, and he could make the whole room laugh 5 minutes later. He wasn't just a fighter, he was a protector, a teammate, a showman, a legend, a family man, and he's survived by his wife, Annie, and his son, Will. Our condolences go out to them. And, Lyndon Byers embodied everything Bruins fans love: toughness, loyalty, humor, heart. And as the Bruins navigate where they're going next, it's people like LB who remind us where they came from. He may be gone, but in Boston, legends like him never really leave. Rest in peace, LB. You'll always have our backs. You'll always be in our memories. And we know that you will always be remembered by Bruins fans. Now, the current group has a chance to make their mark as well. Maybe Tanner Jeannot will one day be remembered as fondly as Lyndon Byers. And look, the Bruins' quiet approach to 2025 free agency may frustrate some, but it could set the stage for something far bigger in 2026, when a historic UFA class and a rising salary cap converge. Still, that long-term vision makes the 5-year deal for Jeannot all the more puzzling, even if it brings needed muscle to take pressure off Zadorov. And as we reflect on the franchise's direction, again, we pause to honor Byers, a true Bruin who personified toughness, loyalty, spirit, and whose legacy will live on in Boston forever. Even players who do not reach the pinnacle of hockey greatness are well beloved and remembered, especially by Bruins fans. And who knows, among the current group, who will be remembered like this in 20, 30, 40 years. Maybe Jeannot will be up there too. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. All right, that is it for today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. My friends, thank you so much for taking the time to join me. Thank you for bearing with me as I took a couple days off for family vacation. And we will be back tomorrow to discuss all things Spoke to Be, whether it's touching on Ryan Bourque being named an assistant with the Providence Bruins, son of Ray Bourque, whether it's the latest reports, rumors out there in terms of, hey, guys, they still might be targeting, whether it is a surprise trade, you can be sure that I'll be all over it. Please do subscribe if you have not already on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Do check out the Locked On NHL podcast next. It is daily league-wide stories that matter most with local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL or on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please do take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you here again on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.